If you can't come up with those allegations, and not just the allegations, but the proof, it's going to be hard to say, why one parent should get more time versus the other. So when you're dealing with these parenting plans, that's just one component, which is timeshare. It's obviously a major component. And timeshare just means, where is the child going to spend their time? Where are they going to put their head every night? What's the schedule going to be? We don't really use custody and visitation language anymore. We don't refer to one parent as the primary or the secondary anymore. The legislature changed that language back in 2008 because they want to promote like this idea that it's equal and like a unit, without giving more credit to one parent versus the other. The other component in the parenting plan is the decision making. That's going to be for major things like health issues, surgeries, doctors, where they're going to go to school, educational issues. So like big things, and big things relating to the child's well-being. Usually it's going to be shared parental responsibility, meaning the parents are going to confer with each other. And again, you might be a father that had a child with a woman and you're not married. Doesn't mean you're not going to get equal time. Doesn't mean you're not going to have equal rights. It should be that so long as you're willing and able, and you don't have some of those major issues that we talked about, that I mentioned, that you have shared parental, that the parents will confer with each other to make these big decisions together about the child's well-being. There are some other types of parental responsibility. There's actually two. So there's where one parent has the ultimate decision-making authority if the parents can't agree. And then there's sole parental responsibility, which is, that's in real extreme cases where one parent's just either not around, or there's some really serious issues that they cannot and should not be allowed to help make decisions with the other parent. So we touched on the DNA testing issue, if you need it, when you need it. And then the fact that ultimately you're going to end up with a parenting plan for this child. Even in these paternity matters, fathers, they get rights. And if they're going to have lesser rights, it's a matter of proving up, why there's an issue. Just another like real life case so that you can see some of the things we deal with. I had a case a few years ago where they were never married, the parents, they had a child together, and they ended up, I guess they worked out like a 50-50 timeshare schedule by agreement, but the mom had some pretty serious substance abuse issues and some mental health issues. And they ended up like racing down the highway. The mom was chasing the father with the kid in the car. And then they ended up in like a driveway, and the mother, first she got out of the car and was like attacking the father while the kid was in the car. It was like two-year-old kid watching the whole thing happen. Then she got back in her car. I think it was like a Tahoe. It was like two SUVs. She rear-ended the father's car while he and the child were in the car. Then she went around to the front and slammed them from the front. So needless to say, she was arrested. She's still on probation. That was, I think, a pretty serious charge she got criminally. But then we also ended up filing a domestic violence injunction against her for the protection of not only the father, but the child, because the child was not only witnessing it and hearing it, he could have died. So that's a really extreme situation where the mom, she had an injunction. She couldn't see the child. She couldn't contact the child. And then she ultimately got some rights restored where she could have supervised visitation with the child, very restricted, because she had some issues. So in that situation, dad, to this day, has the child 100% of the time. So that's just another real life war story for you. But it's just, every case is so different, and all the facts and the circumstances are so different. I want to mention, because I just had this thought, a lot of times people think, they have this misconception that parents' rights are just being taken away in family court, or that it's capable for that it's possible for that to happen, and it's not. So in family court, again, this is Florida, in family court, we don't do termination of parental rights. That would be dependency court, where you have like the state, DCF, Department of Children and Families, coming in and saying, we want to terminate parental rights altogether. And then you're dealing with a child who's like in the system, and maybe they're going to another parent, maybe they're going to a legal guardian, maybe they're going into foster care, because the parents' rights have been completely terminated, abolished. That's it. And that's not what I practice. That's a different area of law. It's a different court system. In family court, where we deal with divorce and custody, paternity and custody, no one's parental rights are being stripped. The court's not allowed to do it in Florida. That's not what we do here. In Florida, the most that's going to happen is the court's going to say, in like those extreme situations, where one parent's trying to kill the kid, or, there's domestic violence or substance abuse issues, really bad stuff. The most that the court can do is say, you're going to have no timeshare with the child. The other parent's going to have sole parental responsibility, so they can make all the decisions. And the court legally has to give the parent like the tools and the keys to their own cell, we call it. They have to give the parent like the structure, the guidelines of what they need to do, so that they can eventually come back to the court and say, okay, I did anger management classes, I did inpatient treatment, I'm going to AA, I'm rehabilitated, or it's been a year and there's been no incidents, and I want to modify this now, and I want to have a different setup. I want to have some decision-making ability. I want to have certain timeshare, whether it's supervised or unsupervised. So you can always come back to the court and seek a modification. And like I said, if the court's going to strip a parent of parental rights, or I should say decision-making authority and any timeshare, that's not the same thing as a termination of parental rights altogether. So it's two different things. So then we did DNA, parenting plan, and then the child support. So in child support cases involving paternity, you're going to be dealing with the child support guidelines, which again is a Florida thing. Every state has its own formula to figure out what child support should look like. And we literally have a software program where we plug in the different variable the data that we need, and then it tells us what is the child support going to be. Another common misconception is that if the parents have 50-50 timeshare, there's not going to be child support. That is not true. Not true. You can have 50-50 timeshare, but let's say Jane has 50% of the timeshare and she only makes $30,000 a year. And Joe has the other 50% of the timeshare, but he makes $500,000 a year. Those cases exist. And in those cases, there's such a great disparity in the income that Joe is still going to owe child support to Jane. It doesn't need to be that great of a disparity. So even if there's like a $10,000 or $20,000 a year difference in the income, you're usually looking at one parent paying the other child support. And it'll vary. The factors that we plug into these guidelines are the net income of the parties, and net income is after taxes. And then the amount of the overnights that each parent has with the children or the child. And then we also take into consideration the health insurance costs. So if the mom is paying the child's health insurance and it costs her $300 a month, that number is going to get plugged into the formula, and she's going to basically get a credit so that dad has to basically, it's all inclusive in the calculations that dad's paying a portion of that health insurance cost. Any questions so far? Anybody? No questions? Okay, that's fine.